Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsom, and I'm here to break down UFC 274, which is the pay-per-view event that goes down this Saturday night with two title fights, the lightweight championship fight and the women's strawweight championship fight too. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there is a Base AI UFC prediction software recap from the last event last weekend at UFC Vegas 53. That'll be a separate video on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. And I pick a select 3 or 4 fights that I go over from an AI perspective, how the AI did, where it went well, if there was any gems, where it could have done maybe better, if there was some potential opportunities. And also included this week is the disgusting decision from the Jake Collier and Andrei Arlovski fight and how the AI had the predictions for that fight and where it could have been so much better should the judges have done the job and done a much better job in scoring the fight. So make sure you check that out. Like I said, that'll be a separate video in its own Base AI playlist on our YouTube channel. But straight into the breakdowns for this event at UFC 274. In the main event, the lightweight championship fight, we've got Charles Do Bronx Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje. Now, from a betting line perspective, this fight's really interesting because I feel that Justin Gaethje probably should be the slight favourite in this fight, but the bookies can't do it again because they lost money on Charles Oliveira as an underdog against Michael Chandler. They lost money on Charles Oliveira being an underdog against Dustin Poirier. And I feel that if this was Gaethje against Charles Oliveira in the last fight, Gaethje would have been the favourite in that last fight. And obviously if Poirier was fighting Oliveira this weekend, then it'd have been Poirier that was the underdog this weekend. So I just feel that the bookies can't put Charles Oliveira as an underdog again. And because of that, that's why we're seeing the plus money on Justin Gaethje. I'm not saying that Charles Oliveira is obviously a bad fighter. He's one of the most clinical, lethal submission artists that we've ever seen in the UFC. I'm just talking from a betting perspective. I feel if it was Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira last time out, then Gaethje would have been the favourite. The bookies just can't do it again. But into the matchup stylistically, I think that Justin Gaethje, out of all the current top fighters that are in and around that championship fight status, I think that Justin Gaethje is the hardest fight for Charles Oliveira now. Not only has Justin Gaethje got incredible technique with his striking technique that I don't think he gets enough credit for. Not only is Justin Gaethje very durable, can take damage and will keep coming forward, but he hits hard. He's got hard low kicks. He's got pace and pressure that is unmatched in the division at the minute as well. But the key factor in this fight is the fact that Justin Gaethje's got a solid wrestling background and his scrambling ability is absolutely insane. And that scrambling ability is going to really help him in this fight because Charles Oliveira is not going to be able to take Justin Gaethje down from a single leg or a double leg. He's going to have to try and do what he normally does, pressure his opponents, get into the clinch position against the cage and try and sneak around the back. And that's where Charles Oliveira does a really good job. But even if Charles Oliveira does start sneaking around the back of Gaethje and the fight does hit the mat, Gaethje causes these chaotic scrambles. And sure, Oliveira could potentially lock in a submission within one of these scrambles, but it's really difficult because of the pace, the pressure, and how chaotic those scrambles are from Gaethje, and he'll find his way back up to his feet. And I feel that defensive wrestling and that chaotic scrambling grappling ability that Justin Gaethje's got is going to be able to keep this fight on the feet for him. And then with Justin Gaethje on the feet, sure, Charles Oliveira is a good Muay Thai practitioner. He's got good kicks. He's got good elbows. I like the fact he's going with the knees to the body as well. But Justin Gaethje, once he starts getting off on these low kicks, because Charles Oliveira stands in an orthodox stance, once he starts getting off on these low kicks, which he will, I just think that he's going to really beat up Oliveira's leg. Now, Oliveira's durability is in question as well. He was hurt multiple times against Poirier. He was almost finished by Michael Chandler. He nearly never became champion. It was that close. So the durability is in question with Charles Oliveira, but he does have good recoverability. However, if Gaethje does decide to target that lead calf of Oliveira, rather than going for the chin straight away, then I really think that we could see Gaethje start to break Charles Oliveira down. Charles Oliveira is always live for a submission, of course. You know, you can never count that out. Like I said, he's the most lethal clinical submission artist we've seen in the UFC. So if he was to submit Gaethje, you know, I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't think anybody should be surprised. But stylistically, when you look at the bigger picture, I think Justin Gaethje's got all the tools, all the weapons, and the defensive tools and abilities to be able to counteract the offensive game of Charles Oliveira for where he's best. And for that reason, I am going to side with the underdog, and I'm going to be picking Justin Gaethje to win the fight and become the new UFC lightweight champion. And in the next fight, our second title fight of the breakdown, we've got the women's strawweight championship. Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2. This is actually a rematch from way back when in the Ultimate Fighter days, where Carla Esparza did get the better of Rose Namajunas, the takedowns, and eventually found a finish with the submission. But Rose Namajunas has grown a lot since that fight. And to be fair, Carla Esparza, she had a bit of an incline, but then she had a bit of a decline, but then she's back up again and she's doing really well, and it's really good to see. And it's amazing after all these years that we've got these two fighters having a rematch, but for a UFC championship fight. So it's great. I think Carla Esparza's game plan is going to be way obvious here. I think Carla Esparza is going to need to get in with the wrestling. She's going to need to take Rose Namajunas down, which Rose Namajunas can be taken down. We've seen that. However, the one thing that I do want to quickly touch upon is people will see that Weili Zhang took Rose Namajunas down 5 times in Namajunas' fight against her, which she did. However, if you go back and look at those takedowns, a couple of them were kick catches from Weili Zhang. One of them was a drag down from the back. They weren't, in fact, I think there was only one that was a traditional wrestling takedown, and I think it was a single leg. So Carla Esparza, she does need the single legs, the double legs predominantly to get the fight down to the mat. And even though Rose Namajunas was taken down 5 times by Weili Zhang, it doesn't paint a true picture, in my opinion, because those takedowns didn't come from those traditional wrestling takedowns that Carla Esparza is going to be able to be shooting. Now, I'm not saying Esparza is not going to be able to get Namajunas down. I think she will be able to get Namajunas down. But Namajunas' wrestling and her BJJ is good as well. So I don't see Carla Esparza taking Namajunas down and being able to hold her down for 2, 3, 4 minutes of a round. I think Namajunas will be able to find a way back up to her feet. And I don't entirely trust the cardio of Esparza wrestling for 5 rounds either. And this is another point that I think we need to be mentioning here, because if this was a 3-round fight, I think my pick would be leaning over to Carla Esparza, but the fact it's a 5-round fight, it changes things completely, because like I said, wrestling for 5 rounds, I don't think Esparza's got that 5-round cardio of solid wrestling, especially if Rose Namajunas is standing back up and then Esparza's having to take her back down. So I feel that Carla Esparza's gas tank is going to have to be managed here, which could end up being a problem. She's going to drop a round or 2 at least just from that. And that's purely because Rose Namajunas is such a better striker. And this is where the biggest gap in skill is in this fight for me. I think the striking of Rose Namajunas, she's going to be taller, longer. Her range management's good. Her movement's good. Her head movement's good. Her volume's good. She's going to be able to piece Carla Esparza up from the outside when they come in. Then Rose Namajunas has got good Muay Thai as well with her elbows and knees. So I feel that on the feet, Carla Esparza is outmatched here for sure. But it's the wrestling and grappling of Esparza that's going to give her any sort of chance of winning this fight. And I think she can be successful with it for maybe a round or 2. But I don't think the wrestling and grappling is going to be such a significant advantage over Rose Namajunas in this fight for Carla Esparza to be winning 3 or 4 rounds. So for that reason, I am going to be siding with Rose Namajunas to win this fight. I'm picking Rose Namajunas to win the fight, and still the UFC Women's Strawweight Champion. And in the next fight, this is a fight I feel like a lot of people are going to be talking about. We've got Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. And the betting line here is absolutely crazy. I think it's stupid that Tony Ferguson's a 3-1 underdog here. I get that he's on a decline. I get that he's not the fighter he once was. But go back and look at the fights that he's been losing recently. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. It's very rare for a fighter of Tony Ferguson's quality to be on a 4-fight losing streak or to ever hit a 4-fight losing streak. So Tony Ferguson, last fight against Beneil Dariush. You know, Dariush is a good fighter. I don't think he's the top level in the division, but he's a good fighter. However, how Tony Ferguson lost that fight was just getting taken down and spending too much time on his back, trying to lock up submissions and reverse and just not being urgent enough to get back up to his feet. That's how he lost. Then you go back to the fight before that, Charles Oliveira, he lost that fight purely from getting taken down and being controlled against a world-class Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. Then the fight before that was Justin Gaethje, where Gaethje did beat him over 5 rounds, eventually stopped him. In the 5th round, the referee had just seen enough. It wasn't a knockout, but he did beat him up badly. Now, on fighters' declines, when they're getting up in age, you do tend to find that they slow down, the durability is low, they're getting knocked out, and you can see that obvious decline pattern. But with Tony Ferguson, it's not like that. Tony Ferguson's losing fights predominantly because he's getting taken down and held down, and he's spending too much time on his back. The only fight in that losing streak that doesn't meet that criteria is the Justin Gaethje fight, but this is a fighter that's now fighting for a world championship on this same card. So I think the decline of Tony Ferguson is definitely being massively exaggerated here. I'm not not saying he should be a favourite in this fight, but plus 300, I think it's ridiculous. You know, Michael Chandler at plus 400. I think there's an obvious pattern of how this fight's going to play out. I think that Michael Chandler's going to take the first round. He starts fast, he's explosive, he's powerful, and he's got a chance of finishing Tony Ferguson in that first round. Even though Ferguson, I don't believe his durability is in question, Michael Chandler hits hard enough to knock anybody out. So that first round, I feel that is absolutely going to go to Michael Chandler, and he's got a knockout chance in that round for sure. Then if we fast forward all the way to the third round, if this fight hits a third round, I think Tony Ferguson's going to win a third round due to his cardio, his pace, his pressure, the fact that Michael Chandler's probably not going to relentlessly wrestle. I'd be very surprised if he does. So I think that with Michael Chandler, he slows down as fights go on because he's that fast, quick, explosive type of fighter that starts very fast as well. So Ferguson, for me, that third round, I think is going to be his should it hit a third round. And then Ferguson's got a finishing opportunity in that third round, either via accumulation of volume or snatching up a submission from a lazy takedown, maybe from Michael Chandler if he is tired. So I think Ferguson's third round. So it's what happens in that second round. And it's one of those typical fights where Chandler's going to start the second round better and Ferguson's probably going to end that second round better. You know, Chandler coming into the second round off a good first round and Tony Ferguson preparing for a good third round at the end of the second round. So I feel that it's going to be a very close fight is what I'm trying to say. Michael Chandler, if he does come out and relentlessly wrestle, I'd be surprised. He probably would have success. But the jiu-jitsu of Tony Ferguson is better than the offensive jiu-jitsu of Chandler. I think Ferguson will be able to stand back up and maybe even snatch a submission himself. I think that, like I say, the betting line's massively off. I think it is a close fight. The line should be much closer. And to a surprise to some people that are reading too much into the betting line, I'm actually going to take the underdog pick here with Tony Ferguson. I feel that in a striking battle, his pace, his pressure, and his volume is still there enough to be able to beat Michael Chandler. Ferguson will have to weather a storm, absolutely. There is that knockout chance in round one, but if Ferguson gets out of round one, I think that he could potentially pull away with the fight and do well. So I am, like I said, taking the surprise underdog pick here, and I'm picking Tony Ferguson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ovince St. Preux versus Mauricio Shogun Hua. And again, this is a really interesting fight. I feel like OSP has always been quite a difficult fighter to read. He's got skills everywhere. He's decent striking. He's got wrestling. He's got jiu-jitsu, of course. You know, he's got the Von Flue choke that people are trying to rename the OSP choke or St. Preux choke or whatever they're trying to do. It's a Von Flue choke. But OSP is a good all-round fighter. Now, I don't think that Shogun is completely over the hill here. I think Shogun's still got something left in the tank. I don't think this fight's a mismatch. Shogun's a 2-1 underdog on the betting line at the time of recording. Again, I think that's a really bad line as well. I think their fight is much closer than that. I think Shogun's striking's better. I think his offensive wrestling's better. And on the mat in the grappling department, I think it's quite close. I'm not sure that either fighter, if there's a takedown to happen in this fight, is going to be able to spend extended periods of time on top. I do think this is a fight that is more than likely won and lost on the feet. And I like the forward pressure of OSP. I like the forward pressure of Shogun. I like the fact that Shogun will come forward. He will still put combinations together inside boxing range. I think OSP can be got at. I don't think he's as active as he used to be. And the fact that he's not a quick, erratic mover like, for example, Paul Craig, even though, in my opinion, OSP and Paul Craig striking, there is a difference there. But Paul Craig's a quick mover, and he's also got, like I said, good angles, fast striking. I don't think OSP's got that entirely, and I think that he's going to be able to be got at because of that. I think that Shogun's still got something left in the tank here. The only concern with Shogun is the fact that his durability is a little bit of a question mark. He is getting up there in age. OSP does still hit hard. He's still got knockout power. But I think if OSP doesn't find that knockout, I feel that Shogun could out-volume him here. And if anybody is going to shoot a takedown, Shogun's got a good reactive takedown where he'll get a body lock and trip you down to the mat as well. So I think that Shogun's got advantages. Like I said, there's definitely that question mark of the durability. You know, if OSP comes in there and knocks Shogun out, I'm not going to be surprised. But again, I think the lines are massively off. I think they should be much closer. I think that Shogun can do enough good work in this fight to take the win. So for that reason, I'm taking another underdog pick. I'm picking Mauricio Shogun Hua to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a veteran fight here. I actually like this fight quite a lot, and I'm surprised that these two guys have never met before either. We've got Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. And like I said, this is a really good fight stylistically. Cowboy has got good striking, Lauzon's got good striking, they've both got decent wrestling, they've both got decent grappling, and it's a good fight to be made because both fighters are roughly at the same stage of their career. Neither fighter, is declining more than the other, and neither fighter is on a massive win streak over the other either. So I think it's a really good fight to be made. Stylistically, it's going to be a fun fight as well. But at this point, I do think that Donald Cerrone has got that little bit more in the tank. I think he's a slightly better technical fighter on the feet. I think his wrestling's slightly better. The grappling's going to be close if both of these guys hit the mat, because Lauzon's got legit grappling, but Cowboy's got good grappling as well. So I think that the grappling is going to sort of even itself out a little bit here. I think that if the fight does hit the mat, we'll see some scrambles, but the bottom line is when you've got two fighters that are equal in the grappling department, they can both grapple well. The likelihood is if there is a takedown in this fight, then whoever gets on top, I think the fighter on bottom is going to be able to work their way back up to the feet without the fighter on top being able to do too much damage or have significant time control on the mat. So I think if there is a takedown in this fight, their opponent's going to be able to get back up to their feet, and that's going to cause a fight that is likely going to be won and lost on the feet in the striking department. And this is where I favoured Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I think Cowboy, like I said, I think he's got the better technical striking, the cleaner striking. Neither fighter, I think, is going to have massive knockout power here. I think that it's going to be a technical striking fight, and Donald Cowboy Cerrone is just going to get the better of Lauzon. I think he's going to land more volume. I think the combinations are still going to be good from Cowboy as well. He leads with the jab, but then he'll rip to the body, he'll rip to the head. He's got good knees, he's got good kicks. I think from a complete striking perspective, I think Cowboy's the more complete striker. He's got more tools, more weapons in his arsenal to be able to be used against Lauzon. I'm not counting Lauzon out. There is a chance that Lauzon comes in here and he can put a bit of pressure on Cowboy, get Cowboy backing up and have moments. And ultimately, I do think Lauzon is going to have moments, but Cowboy, for me, in a fight that is going to be likely won and lost on the feet, I think Cowboy's the better striker. I think it's going to be a technical point striking fight. I think Cowboy's going to land more volume. I think he's going to land the better combinations, the better selective strikes as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Donald Cowboy Cerrone to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Randy Brown versus Khaos Williams. Khaos Williams is an absolute powerhouse, and this is where I've got concerns for Randy Brown. Randy Brown's a decent technical fighter, but he's got a tall frame, he's got long, skinny legs, and I think that Khaos Williams has got a couple of options here to be able to put a good beating on Randy Brown. I think the legs are definitely going to be there to be kicked. Khaos, like I said, he's a powerhouse. He's got power with whatever he throws, whether that be kicks, whether that be punches. And we saw in the Miguel Baeza fight as well, Khaos Williams has got this ability to really just make his opponents hesitant, because if they overcommit, Khaos Williams just explodes in that boxing range. And it's those explosions that cause the hard punches that lead to the knockouts. And that's where the hesitancy from his opponents comes. I think that Randy Brown, his advantage in this fight is he is a little bit taller, he is a little bit longer, so he could potentially stay on the outside, striking inwards. But I think Khaos Williams has got the ability to be aggressive, forward pressure. That's in his nature, to come forward, get in the face of his opponents. And once that distance, that outside distance is closed and we're getting into the boxing range, I think that Khaos Williams is super dangerous. And even from the outside, Khaos Williams can step in and hit Randy Brown with a low kick onto, like I said, the thin calves and start causing damage that way. So Randy Brown, again, I think he's going to have moments purely because he can fight on the outside, striking inwards, like I said, with his punches, with his kicks, but I just don't think he's going to be able to do that for 15 minutes. And once Khaos Williams starts closing the distance and starts putting that pressure on Randy Brown, I think Randy Brown's going to become really hesitant. I think he's going to freeze inside those wild exchanges as well. And Khaos Williams, he's got that knockout power and he could absolutely knock Brown out. But if he doesn't, we have seen him go 3 rounds and his cardio can hold up as well. So again, I feel that Khaos Williams has absolutely got the finishing side, the upside in this fight for sure. But if it does go to a 3-round decision, then Khaos Williams has shown that he can fight for 3 rounds as well. That pace, that pressure, that aggression, looking to finish the fight at all times is something that the judges like to see as well. So with everything put together, I am picking Khaos Williams to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Macy Chiasson versus Norma Dumont. And I think this is a good fight for Norma Dumont. I like Norma Dumont as a fighter. I think she's really well-rounded and she's good everywhere. She's aggressive when she needs to be, but she can be defensive as well. She knows when to pick her moments coming in and out of range. She's got power in her hands. She likes to get in the face of her opponents and land that power in her hands, but she'll also utilise kicks, low kicks. And then if the fight isn't quite going her way, or if she doesn't need to secure a couple of rounds, or just slow things down and get a breather, then she's got the ability to be able to close the distance, clinch up with her opponents and really slow that fight down, make it dirty, ugly, gritty, the grinding type of fights that we speak about often. And she did that in her last fight against Aspen Ladd, she really shut that fight down and just slowed the fight down when she needed to. And inside that clinch, she's strong, she's powerful, she lands good elbows, good punches, and she does just enough to make sure she's winning the rounds and the referee doesn't break them for inactivity. So Norma Dumont, for me, is a really good fighter. She's got to be careful with Macy Chiasson at times here, because Chiasson is tall, she is big for the division, and she does have power in her strike. She does have a good clinch game herself. But Macy Chiasson, I feel that stylistically she could be taken down here and controlled by Dumont. But on the feet, I don't think Chiasson's got a massive advantage, or if any advantage at all, in able to just be able to pull away with this fight on the feet striking. And if she does start getting off on good strikes, Dumont can just close the distance, clinch up with her and use her physicality to slow that fight down and reset. But like I said, the big advantage for me is I think that Dumont could take Chiasson down and control Chiasson. I think Dumont's cardio is better as well if this fight does go into a second and third round. So with everything put together, I think Dumont's the more complete fighter, the fighter that's more likely to be able to control the majority of this fight. So I'm picking Norma Dumont to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Brandon Royval versus Matt Schnell. This is going to be a really interesting fight. I think this is a fight that's actually going to be won and lost with the grappling scenario. So I think there is going to be takedowns. I think there is going to be a lot of scrambling. I think there is going to be a lot of topside control, submission hunting. On the feet, I actually think that Matt Schnell's the better striker. I think he's faster. I think his combinations are better. But with Brandon Royval, every single fight, the trend with all his fights is it ends up very fast, very chaotic. It ends up just being a crazy, fast-paced, action-packed fight that everyone's, standing up and watching and can't take their eyes off the screen. And there's a reason why every single Brandon Royval fight is like that, and that's because he creates a fight like that. He gets in the face of his opponents, he crashes forwards, he's not bothered if he takes a punch or two to start this chaotic type of fight. And even though Matt Schnell's the better striker, it's probably not going to matter here because of the way Brandon Royval pushes forward, crashes forward, throws crazy strikes to get into boxing range, to get into these clinch positions and start getting the ball rolling with takedowns and grappling. And like I said, I do think that Schnell's got a decent wrestling as well. Brandon Royval's going to be able to get this fight down to the mat if he wants to also. And once the fight does hit the mat, like I said, I think we're going to see some good scrambling, good grappling. I think we're going to see submission attempts, and that's where I think that Brandon Royval's better. I think the gap in skill in this fight isn't too dissimilar from the striking of Schnell to the grappling of Royval, but I do think that we're going to see way too many grappling exchanges for this fight not to be won and lost in the grappling department. And because of that, I have to favour Brandon Royval. I do think the line is slightly wider. I think it should definitely be closer. But I do think that Brandon Royval's grappling, even though it can look messy and chaotic, I think it is more controlled. I think his submission ability is greater than Schnell's. And just having that ability to pop topside and just having that ability to have that magnet to get topside when he needs to, again, I think is another advantage for Brandon Royval. So I am picking Brandon Royval to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a really interesting fight here. We've got Blagoy Ivanov versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Now, anybody that's been following my breakdowns and bets for years knows that, I've always had a bit of an issue with Blagoy Ivanov picking him to win fights because I just feel that he is a very beatable fighter. However, in this fight, we are going to flip the script because I feel that this could potentially be one of the easiest fights to call on the entire card if Blagoy Ivanov follows a certain game plan. And that if is absolutely huge because Blagoy Ivanov, he's got good takedowns, he's got good throws, he's got good trips, he's a world champion in combat sambo. He's got the ability to get fights down to the mat, and we've seen him take big guys down like Derek Lewis. He got down to the ground a couple of times, and he's also got a decent submission game when he's on top as well. Now, against certain opponents in the heavyweight division, this sort of stuff just isn't going to work. But against Marcos Rogerio de Lima's got real issues in being able to defend takedowns, and once he gets his back on the mat, he can pop up once or twice, but typically he can get control on the mat. His gas tank drains when he's on his back on the mat trying to get back up to his feet. And with Ivanov's topside pressure, his submission game, I think he can really cause problems for de Lima if he gets the fight down to the mat. The only problem that I've got with Ivanov is Ivanov doesn't always look to get the fights down. He can look to stand and strike, and take that point fighting style into the cage. But against Lima, even though that might work later in the fight, that poses a massive risk for Ivanov early in this fight, because Lima's got raw power in the heavyweight division. He's a really solid Muay Thai practitioner. He's got power in his hands. He's got pressure. You know, look at the way he knocked Rothwell out. Rothwell doesn't get knocked out like that typically. And Lima did that in under a minute, just went forward and just absolutely put it on Rothwell. The only thing to counter that with, again, this is why I'm liking Ivanov in this fight, is because Ivanov, we've seen him take hard punches. We've seen Derek Lewis hit him with punches that would knock 99.9% of the fighters out in the UFC if they got hit clean with. And he was hitting Ivanov with those clean strikes. But Ivanov he didn't even look massively rocked at most part. He was getting hit with elbows, clean punches and knees. So he's got a chin on him at heavyweight. However, you can't always rely on that. And especially someone like Lima, I can't sit here and say, look, Ivanov's got a good chin. He's going to be able to take the shots of Lima, because this is the heavyweight division and Lima's got that raw power that he could knock any fighter out with. Even though Ivanov took those strikes against Derek Lewis, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be able to eat clean combinations from Marcos Rogerio de Lima. But outside of that knockout, going into the second and third round, I think Ivanov's cardio's better, his wrestling's much better, his grappling topside is a legit problem for De Lima as well. So stylistically, Ivanov's got an amazing fight ahead of him here, but I'm just very conscious that he stays standing and doesn't really use it, and De Lima lands something to knock him out. But again, like I said, he's got a good chin. So it's a good fight for Ivanov. If he comes into this fight, uses his wrestling, uses his throws and his trips, and gets this fight down to the mat, I think he's going to be able to control De Lima on the mat top side, and I think he's probably going to be able to find a submission as well, because De Lima has been submitted so many times in his career. So for those reasons, the cardio advantage, the fact that Ivanov is durable, the massive advantage in the wrestling and the grappling department, and the fact that Ivanov's not a massively bad striker either, especially compared from a technical perspective to De Lima also, I am going to have to side with Ivanov. I'm picking Blagoy Ivanov to win this fight. In the next fight, we've got Francisco Trinaldo versus Danny Roberts, and this is a fight again that I feel that's going to be won and lost on the feet. There might be some wrestling and grappling scenarios, but I think we're going to be few and far between them, and I don't think they're going to be significant enough to cause any sort of result implication from that wrestling and grappling in this fight. I think it's a fight that, like I said, is going to majoritively take place on the feet. I think all 3 rounds, should it go 3 rounds, the better work is going to be done on the feet. So in the striking, we've got Francisco Trinaldo. He's a world-class kickboxer, but I do feel that even though he's not down and out with his age, he's a very old fighter, he's still got some left in the tank for sure. I do feel that he is slowing down a little bit. I feel that he's not as crisp or as powerful, and he's not as active in regards to his volume as what he used to be a few years ago. And if I'm being fair, on the other side, Danny Roberts doesn't have massive volume either. But the one thing that I do like from Danny Roberts here, he is the younger fighter. He is the fighter that's going to be taller. He's going to be longer. We're in the big cage as well. So in a fight that's predominantly going to take place on the feet and be won and lost in the striking department, I think that Danny Roberts is going to have an advantage of being able to strike from a little further out, where Trinaldo is going to have to get into range, and he's going to have to get into that boxing range and land strikes close in. So if Danny Roberts has got good distance management here, and he is a good technical striker as well, then I feel that he's going to be able to use that tall, long advantage to his strength and to his advantage as well. And another thing from Trinaldo's perspective as well, Trinaldo as a southpaw normally does really well against orthodox fighters, but Danny Roberts is a southpaw also. He can switch stances, but he's predominantly going to fight in that southpaw stance, and I think that's going to potentially throw Trinaldo a little bit as well, because Trinaldo loves to fight these orthodox fighters where he can throw the big overhand left straight down or straight over the middle of their opponent's guard. But here I think it's going to be a little bit of a different fight. I think there's a lot of things that do favour Danny Roberts here. He's definitely got to be careful he doesn't get hit with anything hard from Trinaldo, and he's got to make sure he doesn't fight for long periods of time in that boxing range with Trinaldo, because that'll give Trinaldo every opportunity to get off on volume, strikes and power. But I think Danny Roberts is better than that. I think he's going to be able to fight smart, choose when he comes into range, get his distance management, and use that length, that height advantage that he's got. So for those reasons, I'm picking Danny Roberts to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tracy Cortez versus Melissa Gatto. And this is a very good fight stylistically, because Tracy Cortez has got really good wrestling. She'll be looking to get this fight down to the mat, but Melissa Gatto's got really good grappling. The one concern of Gatto is she can spend a little too long on her back before trying to get back up to her feet at times, but she does normally try and secure a submission or two against an opponent who has got good topside jiu-jitsu. And I'm not saying Cortez hasn't got topside jiu-jitsu, but I feel that Melissa Gatto could potentially have some success on bottom trying to hunt for a submission, but I do think she'll also be able to get back up to her feet as well. The thing is here, Gatto's just going to have to deal with quite a lot of wrestling, especially early on in this fight. She's going to have to keep her head, because what happens a lot of the time when the wrestler secures takedown after takedown after takedown, the morale can be broken from the opponent that's getting taken down. They'll get really hesitant striking because they're conscious of the takedown coming in. But Gatto's got really good jiu-jitsu, and I think her striking's more technical than Cortez's as well. So I think as long as Gatto's using just good fundamentals, like a good jab, a good 1-2, not rushing into range striking, just make sure she's picking her moments coming in and out of range so Cortez isn't trying to time the entries on the takedowns. I think Gatto can do a really good job. And if she is taken down, like I said, I think the jiu-jitsu of Gatto is definitely better than the jiu-jitsu of Cortez. So that'll give Gatto the ability to either sweep, reverse, and stand back up to her feet. And this is what's really interesting with Gatto, because her reversals, her sweeps are actually really good. And if she can sweep Cortez and get on top of Cortez, that topside jiu-jitsu against the wrestler on her back, I think that Gatto's going to be able to do really good work on top of Cortez if she can get on to those top positions. I think, like I said, the striking slightly more technical from Gatto's side. She does have a lot of wrestling to deal with here, and that could be an issue. We might just see something like what we saw with Grant Dawson last week in regards to just takedown after takedown after takedown and just being able to control and take the minutes and the rounds away from Gatto. But Gatto's jiu-jitsu is something that definitely can't be ignored here. The sweeps, reversals, and being able to stand back up to her feet is going to be in her favour. Because of that, I feel the stylistic matchup can potentially run away from Cortez if she's relentlessly wrestling, overshooting. I think Gatto's got advantages here. If the fight is won and lost in the wrestling and grappling department, which I assume it's going to be because of the styles of both fighters, I like Melissa Gatto's chances of finding herself topside and causing problems on top of Tracy Cortez after a takedown within a scramble. So I'm picking Melissa Gatto to win this fight. And in the next fight, I can't wait for this guy's debut. We've got Kleydson Rodrigues versus CJ Vergara. Kleydson Rodrigues is an absolute phenom, it looks. He is going to take a loss or two along the way. He's 7-1. He's still 26 years old. He's still learning his craft. So, he's going to take a loss or two along the way. But this guy looks like he's got absolutely every tool in the box to become a legit prospect in the division. He's got good striking, he's got power, but his technique is so clean, it's so crisp. He fires it out fast with conviction. He's got good accuracy on his strikes as well. But then he's so good inside the clinch. He's strong, he's got good wrestling, he's got good trips and throws, he's got good jiu-jitsu. He will go for submissions as well. He's a complete package. His cardio is also really good. His power in his hands and his kicks is also solid as well. There doesn't seem to be any legitimate holes that we can see right now in Kleydson Rodrigues' game. That might come a little bit later on when he's fighting better level competition, where we do start to see where he needs to develop and where he is struggling a little bit. But right now, at this level, he just looks like a solid, phenomenal prospect, and I'm really excited to see him inside the cage. He's facing CJ Vergara, though. Vergara is a guy that likes to get in your face, fast-paced, will be well-rounded everywhere. He's got decent wrestling, he's got decent grappling, his striking's quick, in and out of range, sliding in and out, striking. So Vergara is going to bring the fight to Kleydson Rodrigues, and I think that Kleydson Rodrigues is going to have a good test here from that perspective. I think Rodrigues is the much better striker. I think he's the better grappler, the better wrestler. I think he's got more power in his hands as well. He's going to be a nightmare for Vergara, but Vergara is going to offer something to Rodrigues in this fight to create a good test for him to see how he handles a fast-paced fighter that's going to get in your face. But I think that Kleydson Rodrigues passes this test with flying colours. I think he's going to look great on the night. He could potentially finish via knockout. He could potentially grab a submission if the fight hits the mat. And if it does go 3 rounds, his volume, his activity, and his forward pressure, and just that clean, clinical, crisp striking should be able to get him at least 2 out of the 3 rounds, potentially all 3. So everything together, I think Kleydson Rodrigues is definitely a fighter that we're going to be talking about after the event. I'm picking Kleydson Rodrigues to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Lupita Godinez versus Ariane Carnelose. And this is a good fight because both fighters are very similar. They're very aggressive. They like to be in the face of their opponents. They like to land hard punches, look for takedowns, look to kick the grappling off with ground and pound, submission attempts. And like I say, I just think they're both very similar in regards to the fighting skills, qualities, and skill set. I do think that Lupi to Godinez, though, has fought the better level of competition, and I do think she's going to have the edge in where I believe where this fight is won and lost, and I don't think the fight's going to be won and lost in the striking department. I think the wrestling and the grappling is definitely going to be prominent at some point. Obviously, all fights start standing, so I do think that both fighters are going to go into this fight to test the striking and feel their opponent out and see where their entries are going to come in from for the takedowns, and also just to see if any of the fighters have got an advantage in the striking department over their opponent, because that's good reads to make. However, I think that it's just the nature of both fighters just to start closing the distance and getting a hold of each other and trying to be overly aggressive. And once they meet in the middle and clash forwards, which I think is inevitable, then that's when I think we're going to see the wrestling of Godinez. I think Godinez is going to be able to get this fight to the mat. I think she is going to be able to take Carnelossi down, who has been taken down in previous fights. And I think that Carnelossi's more likely path to victory in this fight is to stay out of that clinching scenario and try and put some good punches together, good combinations together, and put power into the strikes against Godinez. But I think Godinez can match her there. And like I said, naturally, both of these fighters are so aggressive, they're going to meet in the middle. And that's where Godinez is going to be able to get her takedowns. She might need 2, 3 or 4 to really start getting some top control time against Carnelossi. But I do think the wrestling and the grappling and the ability to stay topside and do good work in that top position is in the favour of Lupi to Godinez. So for those reasons, I'm picking Lupi to Godinez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jenny Newson versus Fernie Garcia. Jenny Newson, for me, is the better all-round mixed martial artist, I think, from what I've seen, the wrestling and the grappling, especially the grappling. He comes from a grappling background, is better than Fernie Garcia's. But Fernie Garcia, where he's a problem, he's a boxing heavy fighter. He comes from a boxing background, his family comes from a boxing background, and you can really see that with his striking, with his combinations. Everything's clean, it's crisp, and like I said, it's thrown with 2, 3, 4 punch combinations. The problem that I've got with Fernie Garcia in this fight, though, is he's very hittable, and Jenny Newson can watch out for this. Jenny Newson has the ability to crack Fernie Garcia as he's coming forwards. And Fernie Garcia's got to be very conscious of this, because as Fernie Garcia's being aggressive and moving forwards, he does leave himself open to be hit. Jenny Newson can crack, and Fernie Garcia's got to be careful that he's not hit too much here, because ultimately it's going to lead to him being knocked out. And I feel that with this sort of style, at some point, a fighter is going to find that knockout on Garcia, but I'm not sure it's going to be in this fight because of the way that Garcia pressures forward with the strikes, the clean, crisp strikes in combinations. It is hard to counter that type of striking. And for that reason, I do think that Fernie Garcia is going to have good moments in this fight where he's putting everything together. And because Fernie Garcia comes forward and lands in volume in those combinations, I think that Jenny Newson's going to have a hard time trying to secure any takedowns here if things are getting a bit too much, because the takedown's much harder when you're moving backwards to then react going forwards. So I think Fernie Garcia's got a good stylistic fight for him here, as long as he can back up Jenny Newson. And if he's not backing Jenny Newson up and Newson's coming forward on Garcia, we're in the bigger cage here, so Garcia can be smart, step back and use that extra space to get his movement going and to find his way back into an opportunity where he can push forwards and be aggressive again. I do think Fernie Garcia is going to be got at some point in his career because of those striking defence issues. But again, that can definitely be something that he's fixed up and patched up. Right now, though, in this fight, I think that Fernie Garcia's got the tools to be able to really light Jenny Newson up on the feet with the boxing, with the combinations, with the power strikes. And for those reasons, I'm picking Fernie Garcia to win this fight. And in the final breakdown of the podcast, we've got a fight that got added not very long ago, to be honest. We've got Andre Fiallo versus the newcomer Cameron Van Camp. Now, Cameron Van Camp should have fought against Nicholas Motta not so long ago himself, but that fight fell through. It was cancelled. I think it was from Motta's side, so I'm assuming Van Camp's just been pestering the UFC for a fight, and they've put him against Fiallo, who only fought a few weeks ago himself against Miguel Baeza, scored a good first round knockout against him. And I think that Fiallo has got a step down in competition now because he's had 2 really good tests against Pereira, against Miguel Baeza, and no disrespect to Van Camp, but Baeza and Pereira are just better fighters with more UFC experience. I do think Fiallo's got to mind his P's and Q's though, because Van Camp's got decent grappling. If he can get this fight to the mat, then he could potentially do good work against someone like Fiallo. But I do think it's a lot to ask for Van Camp to come in here and to take Fiallo down. I think if he takes Fiallo down and wants to do good grappling topside, then I think he's going to have to take him down a couple of times, because Fiallo isn't a fish out of water off his back. He's going to be able to stand back up to his feet, especially in the early moments from the first or second takedown. And I don't think the wrestling of Van Camp is going to be relentless enough to be able to take Fialho down as consistently as what it'd need to be for him to win the fight. And also Fialho's got good aggression, forward pressure, he's got knockout power, he's going to be coming in with a ton of confidence after knocking Baeza out in that first round in his last fight. So again, he's the more likely fighter to be forcing the action, forcing Van Camp backwards. And like I've said previously in this podcast already, shooting the takedown on the back foot is much harder to do. So I think Fialho's got a good fight ahead of him here. Stylistically, I think it's a good fight for him. I think from a quality of fighter perspective, Fialho's better as well. So I'm picking Andre Fialho to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. I know it's a little bit of a longer one, but we had 15 fights to break down for UFC 274. It's going to be a long night of fights for sure, but one that I'm excited for. If you're betting on the event, good luck. If you've tuned in, which I'm sure you have at this point, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate the support, the likes to the video, the subscriptions to the channel. If you want a conversation with me, because it is me that comments on the YouTube channel, then tell me your best bets, tell me where your predictions are and where you think you disagree with me. We'll have that conversation. We'll get everything talking. Thank you all for listening. I'm Newsome. We'll see you next week.